I guess I'll just get things kicked off here because, you know, there's nothing like accelerated aging to bring out the pitchforks and the torches. And I hope everybody brought their good nature and their sense of humor today, because we're here to talk about the different aspects of bringing a distilled spirit to market in less time than is traditional. And there are, as the saying goes, more than one way to skin a cat. And and as someone else I know might say, the science is still out on this. So we've brought some proponents and some opponents and some neutral, and hopefully we can have some fun here discussing what's going on in the distilled spirits industry regarding accelerated aging. Learn a little bit more about something that a lot of people may have a certain disdain for, but not even know anything about, or know what these products are achieving, how they're doing it, what they're trying to achieve, if they think they're successful, if the tasters and the connoisseurs, and more importantly the consumers, never mind the super tasters and the real spirits professionals that knows and evaluates spirits. Oh, hi, Nancy.
Never mind me.
No. So that is the purpose of this panel today, is to explore both sides of this debate and to try and enjoy ourselves doing it. I sure hope Bill Owens is going to show up. So, without further... Oh! I've been ejected. I got a red card.
Wow.
Hey. All right. We're ready to go. Where's Garry? Let's start with Garry. Let's get this show on the road.
All right. Okay. We just made a quick. Yep, we just made a quick announcement about, you know, how these forums run, whether it's question and answers or whether each of us present in turn. It looks like Bill set us up here to do, you know, maybe a brief introduction about what we think about the process. I'll first of all say most of the conference this time has been focused around wood aging and alternatives. We had the talks by Eglantine, Andre, and Bryan yesterday. So it seems to be a theme. I don't know whether it was deliberately intentional or whether it just happened that enough people came along interested in this topic. So it is a hot topic. It's very interesting. In terms of the love-hate relationship, I want to first of all say I am not against rapid maturation. I think rapid aging is a bit oxymoronic, but rapid maturation, I'm not against that. I think it's got its place. One thing, we got into a discussion this morning that was interesting. If you wanted to do, if you're getting it started as a distiller and you want to make some rapidly aged product while you're waiting on the true product for 5, 6, 10 years to come along, one of the things you have to be careful of, I think, is going to be on marketing and sales. Because if your clientele, your customers get used to the product that you've produced, as good as it is, it will be flavorful, it will have a place in the market. If it becomes accepted by your customers, and then you come out with an authentic aged product in 5 years' time, they may react against it, or you may not get the sales that you intend. So that's one thing we kind of thought about this morning. Be very careful about how you approach it. That said, I do believe there is a place for rapid maturation. There is a flavor profile. My biggest objection, and I think it's mostly the media, is that it seems like a lot of the folks doing rapid maturation are trying to say that I'm going to be able to produce a Jim Beam or a Woodford Reserve bourbon in 2 weeks or 2 months. No, you are not. You are never going to be able to do that.
Okay, Garry, time up. Let's go down the line and introduce yourself going down the line, and just 1 minute about who you are, and we'll go down this way.
My name's Ian Smiley. You might know me as the author of some of the distilling books out there, Making Pure Corn Whiskey, The Distiller's Guide to Rum, and I'm from Ottawa, Canada. I guess that's everything I'd say for now.
Yeah, good.
I'm Earl Hewlette. I'm the CEO of Terresentia Corporation. We patented the TerraPure process. We also own the O.Z. Tyler Distillery in Owensboro, Kentucky.
I'm Larry Wu, and I guess Earl's a proponent of the rapid aging process, as are we. So I'm a founder of SpiriTech, and we're doing some of this rapid maturation. And I like that word as well. It's not aging. It really is getting a whiskey to where it's palatable. I've got 35 years in the food and beverage industry. I've worked at Brown-Forman, just always doing innovation. So I look at this from an innovation standpoint. How do you work within the confines of tradition and the industry parameters and add innovation or technology to it? And that's what we're looking at.
Let me add just for a minute. We actually don't use the term rapid maturation or rapid aging. We talk about fast filtration. So for us, it's about achieving through a filtration process using chemistry to achieve a taste profile that's acceptable.
I'm John Foster with Smooth Ambler, and I didn't get my own microphone, which is bullshit. I mean, I'll pay extra dues if I get my own microphone next time. At Smooth Ambler, we are not opposed to rapid maturation or accelerated aging or whatever you want to call it. It's not what we do, but we certainly are not opposed to it. I've had great young aged spirit that I've really liked. I've had vodka I wouldn't clean a windshield with. So, I mean, I think it's just a matter of personal taste, and we don't begrudge anyone their hustle, whether they want to do it the hard way and wait for product, which actually we really didn't. I mean, we do a lot of accelerated maturation. It's called buying old whiskey and sourcing it. We don't begrudge anybody that hustle. It's just we've decided that for us, we're just going to make whiskey and put it in a big barrel and wait until it's ready.
And hi, my name is Bryan Davis, and I'm the founder or co-founder of Lost Spirits Distillery. We're probably one of the more, I guess, talked about people in this space, and the things that keep Garry awake at night, based on the reading I've seen.
You have to talk louder. Put your mouth.
Sorry. So to do that again, my name is Bryan Davis. I'm the co-founder of Lost Spirits, and the guy who created a technology and published data on it that I think keeps Garry up at night based on the amount of online writing he's doing. And so I guess I'm here to be the protagonist in the story.
All right. Should we open it up for a question? Anybody got a good question? Yes.
Even if it were possible to achieve accelerated aging, why would you want to do it? When great spirits somehow mark the passage of time and record influences like weather, place, is it really that we're just making an industrial beverage, or are we really providing our consumers with an experience that can't be achieved any other way than with very classical methods?
I think there's a third option in the mix of that. I think you've got two, diametrically opposed ideas there. I don't think that by using science and technology and engineering in order to make a better product for your customers, you're necessarily creating industrial alcohol. I think there's certainly people who might use it that way. In my own distillery, we're doing everything from fermenting bacteria we harvest out of seawater in order to capture aspects of the aroma of the ocean, to charring wood in interesting ways, using enzymes extracted from molds in order to break down lignin in different proportions than normal. I think all of those things that lead you down the path of creating a new kind of spirits company are really exciting and just as noble as the traditional.
Have you thought about importing wheat sprouts from the space shuttle?
If I could, I would.
I think it's a supply issue as well, right? So, I should have said earlier too, no cats were harmed or skinned in our process.
Speak for your own distillery.
Yeah. I think still there. You know, if we use that thought, we'd still be riding horses, and we'd still not have phones or laptops or handheld devices. Where I think technology is always going to push for better, and it's not just rapid. It's just good quality products that maybe don't take 8 years to make. Maybe in the consumer's mind, 6 months or a year is enough if there's some other technology applied to it. So, and it is a supply issue, right? So how many people can find 4-year-old bourbon right now to put into bottles if you don't have it if you don't have barrels in inventory? It's pretty tough to find at a reasonable price. And I think we're able to give people options in that regard.
If I could chime in one more time on that really quick, just for 2 seconds. I think so much of this that gets lost in the conversation is that it's about intent. If your intent is to go grab a 40-year-old Armagnac, taste that and say, okay, if I can't compete with this, I shouldn't be allowed to be on the shelf. And you start with that perspective, and then you say, how do I use science, technology, ingenuity, and innovation in order to get to a spirit that can hold its own from that point of view? Then I think you're really doing something that's a service to your customers. And so I think the main objective is to have the customer at heart when you're asking, how do I give my customer a better experience for the money that they're spending, as opposed to how do I lower my production cost, or how do I do one of those other things that really the customer has no reason to care about. They're your problem, not the customer's problem.
Can I ask a question, please?
Mm-hmm.
Please speak up. Speak louder.
Okay. For those of us that are either really new or like us that are going to open up a distillery this summer, and for us, we need cash flow. We live in a town where people are excited about what they're doing. They want to come in and have whiskey in a reasonable amount of time. Could we talk about methodologies that are of use to new distillery like ours, in addition to discussing inherits?
You want to take that on?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So, first of all, I think you all know in this industry we've been trying for a long time to find ways to be more efficient about aging. We've used heat cycling. We use small barrels. We blasted music at barrels. We've done all sorts of things, trying to be more efficient, because when you look at the process, look at the evaporation that takes place over time, look at the cost, and nobody really wants to wait that long unless there's a big payoff. So there's been a lot of work on how to do it faster. So I think that the issue is, whatever method you employ, what's the result? Does a consumer like the product? What are you trying to achieve? For us, it's trying to achieve a commodity, to take a 6-month-old aged bourbon that's got the color and got the oak phenolics, and then make it drinkable. And if you can make it drinkable comparable to a 3 or 4-year-old product, then you've got value added. You've saved a lot of evaporation, and then it's ultimately up to the consumer to try.
Yeah, question, you think Jack Daniels would take this on?
No. Now, I don't think any existing brand will take this on. Why would they? They've built brand equity. People like their product. They've got the inventory. That's not what this is about. This is about new products coming to the marketplace in a new space, number one, or it's about a way for existing brands, and I know we're working with some brands for this, where they are limited by, as they blend older whiskeys into younger whiskeys to make their taste profile. They're obviously limited in quantity by how much of the older spirit they have in inventory. So if we can help them take a younger spirit they have in inventory, process it or use the technology to get to an older taste profile that they can then blend, we've enlarged their inventory capacity. So I see it being used that way as well as new products.
Garry?
Yeah, I can, I agree with both sides of the equation here. But one thing I want to kind of point out, with no disrespect to Bryan, is that these are not new technologies. The major distillers were doing this same kind of thing 80 years ago.
Really? How did I get the patent then?
The big question comes out. Sorry?
Oh, I'm just confused how I got a patent then.
They didn't patent it.
I'm not sure.
Really?
I can tell you what. But the big question is it tradition that they didn't go that route? With bean counters today, and look at the Budweiser story, you're telling me that if the big distillers couldn't get their product to market in 6 months, 80 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, they wouldn't have done it. So I think the picture is huge. There's a place for everybody in this, but I think the conversation is going to take quite a long time before everybody settles out, determining whether you want to be traditional, whether you want to be rapid. And there is a marketplace for both products. So just want to let you know, it has been done for about 80 years, so it's not new technology.
We have 6 rick houses full of patiently or impatiently, depending on your point of view, aging whiskey. It sucks. It is not immediately fun, and it certainly is fiscally painful to fill up all those barrels and wait for them.
Brown spirits is the wrong business to be in for immediate gratification.
Correct. But to Dan's point, I think there is mojo in doing it the hard way. And that certainly isn't limited to whiskey. Anybody make risotto?
Yes.
You microwave a potato in 10 minutes, but if you make risotto, you're standing there like a jackass. You got the spoon in one hand and a gallon of broth in the other. But that's what that takes. However, I think it's a little egomaniacal for anybody to assume that there isn't some mojo in what Bryan does. Now, it may be different, and it may be more scientific. It may not be the sort of charm of a rickhouse full of whiskey. But I think, in fairness to Bryan, I think to pretend that there isn't some beauty there is a little precocious and certainly a little too soon to call that. Yes, ma'am.
For those of us who haven't read anything about this, could Bryan explain what this process is?
Yeah, sure. So the 3-second version of it, let's see if I can do this in maybe like 2 minutes or less. So I'm going to put it in historical context, which I think will make it easier to understand. I started with a craft distillery in a very unusual position. My girlfriend and I had founded an absinthe distillery in Europe. And we had ended up, before absinthe collapsed and we sold it off, in the position of having a distribution network that spanned the globe and was endorsed by, Sasha Petrosky at Milk and Honey and a whole bunch of the world's top bars as our clients. And so when we started a craft distillery, we had a very unusual distribution network where we couldn't go deep at home and had to compete with a distribution portfolio that included things like Blackadder 25 and a whole host of really fantastic whiskeys and rums and brandies. And so we were in the position of having to try to find a strategy by which we could make something that could hold its own in that kind of a distribution portfolio. And so I spent 7 years working on a process that ultimately uses heat, light, and several other things in the right sequencing to recreate most of the same chemical reactions that you find in 20 to 30-year-old bottles of booze. And I will tell you that we're not finished yet either. In fact, I can say that no one on this panel is finished, in the sense that I have a bottle of Rittenhouse 23 that stares me in the face every morning when I wake up, a bottle of 1981 Diamond Rum that sits right next to it, and those bottles are there as a constant sort of antagonist to say this is what rum and whiskey are supposed to be. Now go figure out how to make that for your customers.
Go ahead.
I just wonder if you could speak to this as much as it is a terminology issue. So I'm from Canada, and to call it whiskey here, I'm not sure what the regulations are, but...
Garry, you have a PowerPoint. You want to go through the PowerPoint to answer that question?
No, I think we're okay.
Oh, we're okay, because you got a nice PowerPoint.
I think we might get off topic if we do that.
So we have to wait 3 years for it to be aged in order to call it whiskey. And I wonder if you could speak to this in as much as it's a terminology.
Oh, when I want to get around that, I just buy 3-year-old stuff and then make it much more interesting.
Actually, there are trade agreements around that. So trade agreements the U.S. has with many foreign countries, including Canada, that specifically calls out bourbon and Tennessee whiskey as being unique products of the United States, which means that our labeling rules, standards of identity apply. And in the U.S., bourbon becomes bourbon the minute it's put in a new charred oak container. So the 3-year rule in Canada does not apply to bourbon or Tennessee whiskey, if that helps.
I guess I mean in the spirit of creating a new category, like if this is a new thing, do we need to come up with new technology to help define that?
I often label my things so strangely that no consumer could walk up to a shelf and understand what they were buying anyway. And I do it on purpose because I don't want my regular customers to sort of feel like I'm trying to market to everyone. Like they know what they're buying, they're keenly aware of it, they've been reading the reviews and following all of that, that world. And that's who my clientele are, so I don't really think about it very much.
And I think to follow up with that, you do have, or I don't know everybody's business plan up here intimately, obviously, but I think the challenge for someone who employs this accelerated aging is sort of a marketing storytelling challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible or that it's bad or negative, but if I were your marketing person, I would tell you, you gotta get that right. We have 10-year-old whiskey out of 53-gallon barrels. And when we go to market, we still hear, well, why should I buy your 10-year-old whiskey when I can buy 15 10-year-old whiskeys out of Kentucky? And we haven't done any accelerated maturation. It's just apples to apples. So imagine the challenge if you have something that's been accelerated and you think that you can do the Pepsi challenge with the 10-year-old whiskey. Again, I'm in no way opposed to it, but I think you've got to make sure that your story is straight and you've communicated that to whoever you hope your consumer to be. J.W. Dant is 6-year-old 100-proof whiskey, and it sells for $15, and it's not terrible. And we remind ourselves of that all the time.
Right. Yeah, but not everyone can get supply like that, right? I mean, the guy's original question was, how do you help a craft guy with the gap? And that's kind of the problem that a lot of craft guys are getting into is, do they have the patience, the capital, and the space even to wait 4 years for bourbon? And when you can, if you can take 6-month-old whiskey, so our process is, and I hate that word process, but getting it through the TTB to call it bourbon, they call it a process. So I'll use that word. But in reality, what we're taking, Earl's right. At 6 months, there's already stuff there. And then there's this thing that I call the irony of bourbon. You age it for 3 years in a barrel. It's beautiful. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. You get all this beautiful color and flavor. Then to put it in a bottle, what do? You add water to it. You dilute it. All that stuff that you built up over the years. So we kind of went the reverse. What if we took immature whiskey and we took the alcohol out and bottle proofed it the other way? What ends up happening is we end up concentrating the color and flavor that's already there traditionally in someone's bourbon or our bourbon, and you just make it taste more mature. It sounds simple, but there's some other things we do where we can segregate flavor and aroma throughout it. But that's basically what we're doing. We're using stuff that's already in the barrel. We're able to get even, we can help people if trends change and all of a sudden there's a glut of bourbon. I don't think that'll happen, but imagine a world where there's a glut of bourbon. Within 6 months, say you could change to a different product. Malt, single malt.
Russ here at Black Swan has done a lot of experimentation on this. Could you address this, Russ? Please stand up and talk loud.
What I'd like to say is brand loyalty. Dad and Grandpa, my God, if he drank anything but their brand, what a sin. Today's millennials don't care about that. They want to try new things.
Yeah.
So
one thing with the seems like we're confusing here is, who's our market? If we're marketing to us old farts, that's one thing. But it'd be interesting to know who's buying what and what age limit they're at. Because as soon as us old farts die off, I'm sorry, the brand loyalty isn't there, and the millennials don't seem to really. And my daughters, all three of my children, every time they go, they want to try something new. They're looking for something good, something that they're palate.
That's been our experience.
Interesting story. They want the background. They want the story of the distiller, where the grain came from, and they almost don't care about the age.
I would say we have 10 years using our technology. We were told early on, you'll never sell this without being able to put an age statement on, or having it older than 4 years. So there's no age statement. We disregarded that, and we put on our labels for our bottled products, aged a minimum of 6 months in new oak, and we have not had issues with that. And to give you perspective, last year we sold and shipped just under 350,000 proof gallons of our TerraPure product. So this year will be 400,000. That's a consumer acceptance, not caring about an age statement or knowing how old it was, purely based on, is it drinkable? Is it enjoyable? Is it mixable? Is it sippable? And is it a good price?
Yeah, go ahead. Please stand up and talk loud.
The needs, it's not that other generations don't, the younger generation doesn't care about those particular age statements, or that they aren't thinking about that. I think that needs of the consumer is shifting and changing as a whole new generation comes in. At Thinking Tree in Eugene, I wrote an article in the paper about the dirty truth about bourbon and how it was spawned by this desire to a stimulus package to put oak cooperage on the map and logging oak cooperage and creating a market for that way back in the early 1900s. I think people are interested in what is happening in spirits. How can we create things that are new? They don't necessarily need to be called bourbon. The consumer wants to know what are they drinking? Where does it come from? How does it grow? And as long as we're transparent and we're not trying to be we're making this and we're going to lie about it. My generation, they just genuinely want to know. And I think that's kind of the fun thing. Spirits is like art. It's just like art and music. And if we can view it in a different way with an open mind.
We agree with that 1,000%. And we're launching our first brand. All of our business to date has been bulk or private label. We're launching our first brand, which is a Kentucky bourbon, so it's aged a year and a day, which is Kentucky law to be called Kentucky bourbon. But our label on the front very prominently talks about technology. That's what's going to make this different than any other Kentucky bourbon.
I think also, I don't mean this to sound as antagonistic as it's going to sound. I think it really does depend, to your point, it does depend on the customer. Some customers are going to dig it, and some people are not. I mean, one person's innovation is the next person's shortcut. And that will be recognized in some fashion with some customers. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just think purely from a sales and marketing standpoint, you better be ready for it when you're talking about your product.
I think it has a lot to do with how good a job you do with it, too. I would say, the vast majority of my customers, we're very transparent with what we're doing. And two, the vast majority of my customers have 200, 300, 400 bottles of whiskey at home. They're part of a whiskey club. They're part of a rum club. They're subscribers to Whiskey Magazine and Malt Advocate, or Whiskey Advocate, they're now calling it. This is their world. They know exactly what they're doing, what they're buying. They're doing blind tastings, comparing things at home for parties. And so where I run into trouble is when I try to go get greedy, and instead of selling the 35,000, 40,000 bottles I sell today, I go trying to market to a wider audience where they're like, well, isn't it better every year it gets older? And it's just like, never mind, right? Like people that don't even appreciate that a lot of times spirits become 30 or 40 years old when they reach full maturity. Most of them are terrible. It's only maybe 1 out of every 3 barrels at that point where you actually get the ones that turn into perfection. You know? And so it's much more complicated than simply age equals better. But for the lay consumers, they often know that, and it's the only thing they know. So I just try to stay away from those people. That's generally a good idea.
I think what you've learned, you know, we've got to look at marketing, you've got to look at consumer perception, you've got to use new generation. One of the things I want to point out, all my esteemed colleagues here have a lot of experience in what goes on behind aging. And what we've seen in the brewing industry, it's very easy to think, oh, look at how Bryan was successful. Look how Terresentia was successful. We can do it too. But what I want to encourage you to do is make sure you get a full knowledge. Understand what is coming out of wood. Understand what aging means. Understand the different conditions. Don't just assume that you can, I don't know whether Bryan sells his technology, but don't just assume that you can go and buy that technology and be as successful as they are. You do really need to learn all the ins and outs behind the process before you go down that route. And as we've seen, obviously marketing as well, looking at consumer. I do think you can produce some great products and sell them, but you've got to be very careful about what it is that you're putting out there.
Ian, what do you tell your first-time customers?
Well, what I tell them is that there's basically 2 processes that take place when you're aging. There's the contribution of the barrel, and then there's the esterification process. That's the oxidation of the congeners that turn into esters and give the lubricious flavor of age. But I tell them that this is all about a chemical reaction that is obviously very inefficient, and it happens very slowly. And I see no reason in the world why somebody can't break the code and be able to accelerate that reaction, have that reaction go in perhaps milliseconds instead of 12 years. One way or the other, it's the same chemical reaction ultimately when it's established. So I see that there are kind of 2 streams of people, the people who love the romance and the lore of the age-old whiskey that's been sitting in a barrel for many years, but then there are the people that just say, but it's inefficient, how do we get there faster? And looking at it from a more pragmatic perspective. And I find that by telling them that way, it establishes a sort of balance in their perspective and their understanding of the spirits and the aging process.
Good. Nancy, you have to stand up and talk.
Oh, sure. So I understand that certainly that there could be 2 separate markets, one for more traditional methods and one for more of a rapid or accelerated maturation. But my question is if you're calling yourself craft, which we're a craft spirits conference, I think most people here consider themselves craft distillers. When I think of craft, I tend to think of slow methods, actually taking the time to do things, and it's not that I'm against those accelerated methods. I'm just wondering if you can still assume the title of craft.
I usually stay away from the title, actually. I don't know that anyone knows how to define it.
Yeah, is there a limit?
Right?
Is there a limit?
Like we've actually had debates about this in articles ad nauseum, right? What is the meaning of it?
How big is it?
And
Tito's had some.
Call yourself artisan. That's a good point.
It's just like French cooking. If I can add to the one point to this, right? It's like French cooking in 1980. There was no such thing as a proper restaurant that wasn't French, right? And then along came, El Bouillet and Alinea and all of these phenomenal restaurants that just completely smashed the entire idea of French cooking. Which isn't to say that those great, 3-star Michelin French restaurants aren't still great 3-star Michelin French restaurants, but it just added a whole new type and a whole new world and a whole new category that made food like 1,000 times more exciting, And that's sort of what I look at as what this looks like if you do it right.
I kind of think of it as McDonald's. I love the taste.
Oh, you.
You had a question back here?
I just have a question in terms of the craft industry. Those who are developing this rapid maturation process, especially Terresentia, you guys are huge. How is this going to affect us as craft distillers? Are you taking an Edison approach, a Tesla approach? Do you want everyone to have access to this on a semi-affordable level? Do you want to corner that market for yourself?
Sure. Yeah, world domination. No, seriously. First of all, I've been very fortunate as we've grown our business to be able to help craft distillers. So a lot of times it's craft distillers that are getting started, they're waiting for their products to age, and they can use some of our bulk spirits. Or they're making one thing and they want to expand their offerings, but they don't want to make it, and so we offer them a different type of spirit. Our technology happens to work on all types of spirits in different ways, but it's beneficial. The other thing is that we're designing mobile processing so that we can we don't license our technology, because if we licensed it, we would have to teach some trade secrets around it and we'd lose control of it. So we made that decision a long time ago. But now what we're working on is how to bring our technology in a mobile way to a distillery and apply our technology to your product. We hope to have that operational by the end of this year.
Wow.
Our process is fairly new. I think SpiriTech we started just last October and November. So we're trying to nip at the heels of the Terresentia TerraPure business. So he wants world domination. We're just going to try for a little piece of the pie. But I think our goal is to get people into the business. We're trying to help you. We can use your bourbon, or you can, same thing, buy our bourbon. I've got, the way that ours works is I can give you either a wood-forward bourbon, so a lot more caramel, vanillin notes, or I can give you an ester-forward bourbon, and then you can blend anywhere in between. So it uses, again, either what you can buy immature or what we can buy for you immature, and we'll get you in the business,
How is the question we're addressing today any different than the question of what is the value of a perfect forgery?
If I made one, I would call it perfect forgery.
Yeah. You wouldn't know. You couldn't tell, right? A perfect forgery, you couldn't tell.
Christian?
Yeah. You pointed out earlier that the large...
You have to stand up and talk loud because people in the back can't hear you.
You pointed out that large producers are invested in long maturation processes. So it's in their best interest to continue marketing and branding age as quality. Is there a danger with small producers trying to take on this rapid maturation by are they hamstringing themselves, heading a marketing behemoth that they can't beat up against? If most consumers are going to assume age is quality, are they taking a short-term gain for a long-term loss?
I mean, you're trying to go against a big company, you're going to be hamstrung anyway from the get-go, because the one thing that you're not going to have is their cost structure, their cost of goods. So I think if you look at it, someone producing a barrel whiskey, I'm just going to guess, right? Maybe $300 a barrel, new fill for a large company, maybe even lower if they've been in the business a long time. Their barrels are cheaper, their new fill liquid's cheaper, their aging warehouse already paid for, so the overhead pieces, you're starting out at a huge disadvantage right away. So going against them, you're hamstrung, right? And then they got all that money for marketing. I don't think they're so much worried about a craft guy as you're worried, as a competitor. Okay, so they're. I think what the big guys are worried about is the more social effect of alcohol on drunken driving, on crime, on poverty, on whatever social issue you can tie to it. I think that's where their attention is right now. Less on the craft industry. I think they believe that, it lifts all boats. So, I mean, you're not going to, I don't think, we've said it before, you're not going to compete against the big guys on price, on marketing. Maybe you can on quality, but you definitely can on technology and innovation or bringing a newness to the industry, a new story.
To clarify a little bit too, I think you're right. I don't necessarily mean that large producers would beat up on small producers by any means, because I think they see them as incubators in a lot of ways as well.
Yes.
They might want to buy you later.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Chris, the people in the back can't hear you.
I mean, in the court of public opinion, whereas they're going to keep marketing as age is quality. Again, not necessarily antagonistic, but that's just the message that they want to continue out. So again, as you mentioned, small producers aren't going to necessarily have the marketing budget to combat that. And again, you're right, I absolutely agree. They're already at a deficit. I'm just curious if that's, again, it's very hard to be able to change long-term public opinion in that regard. Again, not antagonistically, just the tides going against kind of a stereotype that's already there.
Well, I think our volumes argue that the consumer is willing to accept, non-traditional aged products in quantity.
We have a question way in the back.
Yes, sir. I know for this fellow here, the thought that it's been 20 years outside and everything is going to make it taste better to him in his mind. But what has been the outcome of blind testing of these products, both for general consumers and professional tasters?
I can speak to that if you want. I brought some notes just in case I had to get into an argument over something else. So going back to 2015, we picked up Best in Class in Dark Rum at the Miami Rum XP. Now, the technology wasn't anywhere near what it is today at that time, which is why we're in the dark rum category, so that's probably a softball. But if you move into 2016, the Master Court of Sommeliers did a blind taste test with 12 to 20-year-old rums versus one of ours, and we came in second. If you get to 2018, we just picked up, 2015, 50 Best gave us the top rum. 2018, we did a Liquid Gold in Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible. We also did a Global Master Award for Super Premium Rum, beating out Havana Club's Maestro. And we're in the current edition of Whiskey Advocate with a fantastic quote that was supposed to be my closing argument in case I had to use that for something else. But anyway.
Have you entered into the ADI judging?
Can we skip that one and not go there?
I would add to that. So our various products across the spectrum have probably garnered more than 150 medals in 15 different blind taste competitions. I don't put a lot of value on all of that. I mean, there's a lot of debate about how some of these are, but I'll tell you a story. Fred Minnick once interviewed me for an article and asked me about whiskey tastings. And I told him, that we'd won these medals. He said, "Can you send me a list?" And I did. And then he called me back and he says, "Wait a minute, you won for one of our bourbons a silver medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I judged that." And I said, "Yes, you did, and you gave us a silver medal." And he said, "Hold on." So, for whatever it's worth, I think there's been acceptance of these technologies.
We're too new to say anything, but come by. I'm going to do a shameless plug. Come by booth 200, and come taste for yourself. Nancy's actually tasted our stuff.
Okay, one or two more questions.
Sorry, I wanted to swing back to Dan's comment. Thank you, Dan, for asking all these questions that I wanted you to ask. Again, I want to be very, very cordial. No disrespect to anybody here and any of you who will employ some of these methods. But the problem with a perfect forgery is that it is still a forgery. You can chart John Coltrane, and if you're really good and you spend a lot of time learning a song, you might, on a really good day, sound like John Coltrane. But you haven't learned to play like John Coltrane. You've learned to sound like John Coltrane. And again, inherently, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. And God knows I understand getting to market faster and having something to market. Our exercise in accelerated aging when we started was making vodka and gin, and getting that to market so that we could start to talk about our brand and start to talk about what was coming down the line. And again, the best advice that I could give you is just make sure that your sales and marketing is right. And whatever your story is that involves some of these accelerated methods, just make sure that you do everything you can for the category that would prefer the traditional method. If you're gonna be in front of them, I would again encourage you to just make sure you have that story straight, so that if you do get tough questions, you have the best possible response for addressing those and deflecting any concerns. Again, we sourced whiskey, and we spent a lot of time talking about why that made sense for our business, and where did it come from, and what do you guys do differently, and all of that kind of stuff. So, and again, that was all fairly traditional compared to some of the things that we're talking about, and we still got roasted over the coals. So maybe it won't happen, and maybe the category will be accepted. I mean, it seems like based on volume and awards, it's accepted now, whether the people know it or not. And listen, none of us are in the awards business. All of us are in the sell a lot of shit business.
Yep.
I mean, sales are hard to argue with. Just be ready if the questions come.
I have to say, we don't make forgeries, though. We make products. We just a little different. We do it traditionally, and then we filter it. So it's probably not different than chill filtering, just a different type, and it has other benefits.
Question over here.
I just wanted to make a comment about the word craft, because we're all here craft distillers. But some of us are making gallons, some are making tens of gallons, hundreds of gallons, thousands, hundreds of thousands of gallons. That's an enormous spectrum. And the word craft really means handmade. So I don't see technology being used by someone as affecting the handmade part. Not nearly as much as the scale part. We use all kinds of technology. I don't hand mill my grain. I run it through a mill. It's machined, it's designed, it's evolved. Every aspect of the traditional method has technology. The barrels, the stills, the heating of the stills, everything we do uses technology. New instruments, electronics, sensors, measurements.
And my whole distillery is run by a craft computer.
It's a tool. It's a tool for a craft distiller, I believe. It's something that you're going to use to help improve your business model.
Garry, why don't you wrap this up for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in terms of the sensory, and getting back to your point there, it doesn't matter how you make the product. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's whether the consumer buys the product that's important. And what we found with craft brewers is they make the product for themselves. They win an award that says, hey, we've made the most perfect IPA or whatever it might be on the market at that time. And I asked them, I said, hey, you took a gold medal. I said, does this one sell? No, this is our least selling beer. So I think as you go out there, if the market are buying it, that's fine. What I would like to finish up with to say is I don't believe as an industry yet that we are capable of examining products from a sensory point of view, because we don't have the language down. We don't understand yet the wood flavors that are part of the deal. And again, with no disrespect to Bryan, he's presented gas chromatographic profiles of the esters and the fusel alcohols. I don't care whether you put it in a plastic barrel with wood chips or a small barrel or a large barrel. That same product is going to convey those same flavors. It is the wood flavors that we don't understand, we need to get training on. And here's a fact that came to me recently. We've barely scratched the surface in understanding maturation, let alone understanding sensory evaluation. We cannot distinguish more than 3 or 4 components from any product, any food or any liquid. So tell me how easy it is for us to distinguish, particularly if we've got several 40% proof spirits on a panel, to distinguish the differences between those. It comes down a lot to preference, to memory, And we have a long way to go in terms of understanding sensory evaluation before we can often make these distinctions about whether truly it was an award winner, it was different, it should have been in the category, it should not have been in the category. So I think we have to think about those angles as well. So the technology is fine, produce it, let's see if the consumers enjoy it, and if they do, you make your profits. But again, I say let's get an educational system going and understand what it is that we're trying to produce, whether people enjoy it at the end.
Are you arguing that we can't taste?
I'm not arguing they can't taste. I'm arguing that we have not got the terminology down with the panels. And let's look at the wine fiasco. You know, a few years ago, wine experts failed to distinguish vinegar from true, authentic wines. We are nowhere near as competent in evaluation of spirits as the winemakers are in evaluating wines. So that's.
We got a long ways to go.
Yeah, I do think we can distinguish burn and bite, though.
Yes.
Okay, nice applause for these. Out of here.